Hey you, yes, you, come here, come look at this. Our best engineers have been staring at this board for 2 days. He gestured at the whiteboard with the kind of exaggerated sweep that people use when they want the watching room to be in on the joke. 14 people in that conference room turned to look. The man in the gray uniform paused his mop, turned, and looked at the board. It was dense. 7 lines of a machine learning optimization problem involving gradient descent, a partial differential equation that had been incorrectly bounded, and a notation error in the 3rd line that had been propagating the mistake through every step below it. The CEO continued, his voice carrying the particular warmth of a man who knows his audience is laughing with him. You see anything we're missing, champ? Someone near the back snickered. Someone else coughed over a smile. The man in the gray uniform looked at the board for 4 seconds. Then he crossed the room, picked up the blue marker from the tray below the whiteboard, and in 30 seconds, 30, they would count them later, he corrected the notation in line 3, rebounded the partial differential, and wrote the solution in 2 clean steps at the bottom of the board. The room went so quiet you could hear the marker cap click back into place. The CEO's face did something it had apparently never done in front of his staff before. It went completely still. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The man in the gray uniform set the marker down. He looked at the CEO with the expression of a person who has been in this exact situation before, in one form or another, and made peace with it long ago. He said nothing. He picked up his mop. And the CEO, standing in front of his best engineers with the correct solution on the board behind him, had absolutely nothing to say for the first time in his professional memory. He had no idea who the man with the mop was. But some of the people in that room did. And what was about to happen was not going to stay inside that conference room. Have you ever been used as a punchline by someone who had no idea you were the only person in the room who knew the answer? Let me take you back. 11 years. His name was Aurelius James Pemberton, and he had a PhD in applied mathematics from the University of Michigan, completed in 2013, with a dissertation on adaptive optimization frameworks for high-dimensional stochastic systems. His committee chair had described his work in the published foreword as a contribution that arrives not just complete but early, the kind of foundational thinking that the field will spend a decade unpacking. He had published 6 papers in refereed journals. He had been cited 241 times. He had taught graduate seminars for 3 years. He had also, at 34, been diagnosed with a severe anxiety disorder and a social processing condition that made the environment of academic conferences and departmental politics not just uncomfortable but, on the worst days, functionally impossible. Not the mathematics. Never the mathematics. The mathematics was the one place in his life that had always been clean and still and entirely within his control. But the institutional machinery around the mathematics, the panels, the networking, the performance of ambition in front of committees, had by 37 cost him more than he had left to pay. He had taken a step back. That was how he described it to the 3 people he described it to at all. A step back. He had told the department chair that he needed a leave. The leave became a longer leave. He had moved to a smaller city and gotten a job through a facilities contract that didn't ask for a resume longer than 1 page and didn't care about his publication record and gave him 6 hours a day of physical, orderly work and enough quiet afterward to do the mathematics he never actually stopped doing. He published under a pen name. He reviewed papers anonymously for 2 journals. He had a notebook in the front pocket of his gray uniform shirt at all times. A small brown notebook. Its cover worn smooth from years of daily handling, a gift from his grandfather who had taught high school mathematics in Alabama for 32 years and who had told Aurelius when he was 8 years old, "The math is always yours. Nobody can take it off the page." He never went anywhere without that notebook. The company was called Viridian Systems, and it was 6 years old and valued on the strength of its last funding round at $4.2 billion. Its CEO was Harrison Whitfield, 39, Stanford MBA, formerly a product lead at 2 companies that had sold before he could learn what he would have learned by staying, and now the public face of a machine learning infrastructure company whose actual technical work was done by 41 engineers he genuinely respected and 1 or 2 he genuinely feared. He was not, technically, a mathematician. He was, technically, a builder of teams that contained mathematicians, which he sometimes confused with being a mathematician himself. He was quick, charismatic, and gifted at the specific skill of making people feel included in whatever he was doing, which meant that when he made people feel excluded, and he did with the particular cruelty of people who are more comfortable performing warmth than generating it, it came without warning and landed harder than he understood. He had been in the conference room since 9 that morning. His lead machine learning team had been trying to close a gradient optimization problem that was blocking a product deadline. They had the math mostly right. They had one structural error that was breeding 3 downstream errors, and none of them had found it because they had all been looking at the downstream errors rather than tracking back to the source. The CEO had been in and out all day, making the kind of energetic, unhelpful presence that leaders make when they are anxious about a deadline and have no technical solution to offer. He had ordered lunch, he had given a speech about urgency, he had stood at the board twice and asked questions that showed he understood the shape of the problem without understanding its substance. He had been in the room when Aurelius Pemberton came through to clean it at 4:17 in the afternoon, and the opportunity to be funny had presented itself, and Harrison Whitfield had never learned to let an opportunity to be funny pass. What he didn't know was that the lead ML engineer, a woman named Dr. Priya Chandrasekhar, had seen Aurelius before. Not met. Seen. She had been in a seminar at the University of Michigan 3 years before his leave, and she had seen his name on a paper, and 6 months ago she had been reviewing citations for a project and had traced a key reference back to a 2014 journal article and seen his name again. She had not connected the name on the citation to the name on the facilities badge because why would she? But when Harrison called Aurelius over to the board with that sweep of his hand, and Aurelius walked across the room and looked at the board, and then looked at it again more carefully and then picked up the marker, Priya had felt something shift in the room that she couldn't name yet. And when the solution appeared in 2 clean lines at the bottom of the board, she looked at the notation style, the specific shorthand in the partial differential expression, and she went very still. She knew that notation. She had read it before. She had read it cited in 6 papers, and she had read it in the primary source itself, and she was now looking at it on a whiteboard in her company's conference room, and the man holding the marker was wearing a gray facilities uniform. She said nothing for 4 seconds. Then she said quietly to no one in particular, "Is that Dr. Pemberton's method?" And Aurelius turned his head and looked at her, and something passed between them that the room didn't fully understand but felt. He said, "Pemberton, yes." She said, "Aurelius Pemberton?" He said, "Yes." She stood up from her chair. Harrison Whitfield looked at Priya standing up. He looked at Aurelius. He said, "What am I missing?" And Priya said, in a voice that was very controlled but not entirely, "The person you just asked to help as a joke has more citations in my field than anyone else in this building." Harrison Whitfield's face did not recover quickly. His mouth did the thing it had done when Aurelius solved the board. It went still, and this time it stayed still longer. His lead engineer was standing up. His other engineers were looking at the board and then at Aurelius, and the room was doing the quiet arithmetic of who had been in it and what had just happened and what the shape of that was. Look back at the moment Aurelius picks up the marker. Watch how he holds it. He doesn't hesitate, doesn't perform deliberation, doesn't look around the room for permission or approval. He simply reads the board and then solves it, the way you solve something you have been solving your whole life. 11 years of being away from academia, and the mathematics was still right there, clean and immediate, as it always had been. His grandfather was right. Nobody took it off the page. The solution worked. The engineers verified it that evening, and the product feature cleared its technical block and shipped on schedule. Harrison Whitfield sent a company-wide email the following morning. It did not mention the conference room, and it did not use the word apology, and it was not adequate, but it was a beginning. More importantly, Priya Chandrasekhar had by 8 that morning sent Aurelius Pemberton a message through the facilities contractor's scheduling system, which was the only contact method she had. She asked if he would be willing to speak with her. He replied within the hour. He said yes. The conversation lasted 90 minutes. By the end of it, Priya had asked if he would be interested in a consulting engagement, a specific problem set, a defined scope done in whatever way worked for him, at whatever schedule suited him. No conferences, no panels, no performance of ambition, just the math. He said he would think about it. He thought about it for 3 days. He said yes. The subsequent investigation into what had happened, not by Veridian, but by 2 journalists who had heard about it from someone who had been in that conference room, was published in a technology trade outlet 6 weeks later. The piece, titled "The Room That Couldn't See Its Own Expert," described the incident and its context and contained, with Aurelius's permission, a brief overview of his academic work and the circumstances of his leave. It was read 400,000 times in its first week. It was reshared by a dozen senior academics. It prompted an editorial in one of the journals that had published his work. The editorial was about the systems, inside and outside academia, that make it possible for a person with a mind like Aurelius Pemberton's to end up cleaning a conference room rather than working in it, and what those systems cost everyone, not just the person they failed. Harrison Whitfield was invited to respond to the trade piece. He issued a statement that was reviewed by his communications team and was calibrated and corporate and did not quite say the thing it needed to say. Priya Chandrasekhar was asked to comment. She declined to comment on the company's behalf and submitted her own brief statement. Dr. Pemberton is one of the most significant thinkers in applied optimization working today. We are honored to have the opportunity to work with him. The rest of it I'll leave for others to examine. The consulting arrangement became a formal advisory engagement within 4 months. Aurelius set his own terms. He attended no all-hands meetings. He was not put on any marketing materials. He reviewed 2 problem sets per quarter, delivered his analysis in writing, and was compensated at a rate that Priya had argued for internally over significant pushback from finance. He continued his facilities work for 8 more months, and then reduced it to 2 days a week, not because he needed the structure but because he had spent 11 years building a quiet life and was not interested in dismantling it faster than was right. He still carried the brown notebook. He still started every morning with 45 minutes of pure mathematics before anything else, the way his grandfather had taught him to pray, consistently, privately, with full attention. 2 years after the conference room, Aurelius Pemberton published a paper under his own name for the first time since his leave. It appeared in one of the journals where he had been reviewing anonymously for 7 years. The editor, who knew him only as a reviewer and had not connected the name to the citations, sent him a note when it was accepted. She said the committee had agreed it was, in her word, remarkable. He replied with a single line, "Thank you, my grandfather will be glad to hear it." He put the letter in the brown notebook, between 2 pages of calculations, next to the photograph he had carried in it since 1998. A photograph of his grandfather at a blackboard in an Alabama classroom, chalk in hand, mid-sentence explaining something to students who were leaning forward. If this story reached something in you, let it reach somewhere else too. Share it, subscribe, leave a like. Tell me, have you ever been the person who knew the answer and was asked as a joke? Tell me what that felt like and what you did with it. Here is what really gets me. Not the solution, not the 2 clean lines at the bottom of the board that unlocked a $4 billion company's product deadline. What gets me is the notebook. He has carried that notebook every single day since his grandfather gave it to him. Through the PhD and the seminars and the publications and the leave and the quiet years and the gray uniform and every conference room he ever walked through with a mop, the math is always yours. Nobody can take it off the page. His grandfather taught high school mathematics in Alabama for 32 years and never published a paper and never got cited and never saw his name in a journal, and somehow he managed to pass to his grandson the one piece of knowledge that outlasted everything else, that what you know is yours, that no room gets to decide that. So let me ask you, what do you carry that belongs only to you? Not a credential, not a title, something someone gave you or something you built alone that the room cannot touch. What is your notebook? I want to know.